I never thought one weekend camping trip would change the way I looked at the woods forever. It was supposed to be simple, just me. A tent, a borrowed sleeping bag, and a few snacks stuffed into my backpack. Whispering Pines wasn't far from my town, and I'd read online that it was quiet, peaceful, and perfect for first-time solo campers. Honestly, I went there to clear my head. Life had been messy, and I just needed a little silence. The first hour was exactly what I expected. Tall pines swaying gently, the faint rustle of squirrels darting between roots, and the sweet smell of earth after rain. I pitched my tent near a small clearing, far enough from the main trail to feel alone, but not so deep that I'd get lost. I remember thinking, this is exactly what I needed. But by sunset, the forest didn't feel welcoming anymore. The air grew heavy, as if the trees themselves were leaning in closer, listening. Every gust of wind carried whispers so soft, so faint, I thought it was my imagination. But then I realized it wasn't random. The whispers rose and fell, like voices tangled together, speaking words I couldn't quite catch. I told myself it was the wind. It had to be. That night, I built a small fire. The flames crackled, snapping branches into sparks, and I stared at them until my eyes watered. The whispers faded, replaced by the sharp chorus of crickets. I almost laughed at myself for being paranoid. But then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching against pine needles, circling the clearing. I froze, every muscle in my body tense. My flashlight was in the tent, but I didn't dare move. My breath sounded like thunder in my ears. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. The footsteps stopped. No answer. I sat there, clutching a half-burned stick like it could protect me, and finally gathered the courage to shine my phone's flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Just shadows stretching longer than they should have, bending unnaturally between the trunks. I convinced myself again it was probably an animal, a deer, a raccoon, maybe even another camper walking too close. But when I turned back toward the fire, I noticed something that froze the blood in my veins. There were wet footprints leading out of the forest, right up to the edge of my fire. Bare, human footprints, too large to be mine, and they glistened as though the person had just walked out of a river. But I hadn't seen a single body of water nearby. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I heard breathing right outside the thin nylon walls of my tent. A long, deep inhale, a rasping exhale. At one point, the zipper rattled softly, like someone testing if it would open. By dawn, I was a wreck. My fire had burned out completely, but those footprints? They were gone. The pine needles lay flat, undisturbed, as if no one had ever been there. I packed up as quickly as I could, but curiosity gnawed at me. Instead of heading back, I decided to follow the path I thought the footprints had come from. I pushed deeper into Whispering Pines, past crooked trees and undergrowth that clawed at my jeans. That's when I found the cabin. It was hidden so well I would have walked right past it if not for the faint glint of glass. The windows were covered in grime, but inside I could just barely see movement shadows pacing. My heart hammered as I stepped onto the sagging porch. The wood groaned under my weight. I don't know why I knocked. Maybe part of me wanted to prove I wasn't afraid. Maybe I wanted answers. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the air reeked of damp earth and something metallic, like rust or blood. The cabin was nearly empty, except for a long table in the center, and lined neatly across it were dozens of pairs of shoes. Old, muddy, torn shoes. Some small, like they belonged to children. Some still damp, leaving stains on the wood. I backed out, my hands trembling. That's when I heard it. The whispers again, but this time, they weren't in the trees. They were inside the cabin, right behind me. I ran. I didn't stop to look back, not once, even though I could feel something chasing me. Branches snapped, whispers swelled, and cold air pressed against my neck. When I finally burst out of the trees and into the parking lot, the world felt normal again, like the forest had spit me out, tired of playing with me. Other cars had arrived, people unloading their camping gear with cheerful chatter. None of them looked up as I staggered past, pale and gasping for air. I drove home without saying a word to anyone. But I can't stop thinking about that cabin, those shoes, and the fact that I never found where those wet footprints began. I sometimes wake up at night convinced I hear whispers outside my window, soft as the wind through pines. Sometimes, when I walk across the carpet barefoot, I leave damp prints behind me even though my feet are dry. And I know one thing for certain: Whispering Pines doesn't want to be forgotten. If you've ever gone camping with friends, you know the feeling, the laughter echoing in the trees, the smell of marshmallows burning just a little too much, the way stories come alive around the fire. That's how it started for us. 5 of us, old college friends trying to relive the days when life was simpler. We picked a secluded site by the lake, far enough from the city lights to see the stars, and decided to make it a no-phones weekend. Just us, the wilderness, and the crackle of the fire. The first night was perfect. We stayed up too late, telling dumb stories and singing off-key. By the time the fire burned down to embers, our voices were hoarse from laughing. I remember thinking, this is what happiness feels like. But the second night, everything changed. We were sitting around the campfire again, flames licking at the dry pine wood we'd gathered. My friend Ethan was mid-story. Something about a haunted dorm room he swore was true when we heard a twig snap in the darkness. Not unusual animals roam everywhere in the woods, but then another snap, closer, then another, circling. Probably a deer, someone whispered. But the sound wasn't like hooves. It was heavier, slower, like footsteps. We all went quiet, straining to hear. The fire popped, spitting sparks into the air, and for a moment I thought I saw movement between the trees, a tall figure, just outside the ring of light. Too tall to be one of us, too still to be an animal. Ethan tossed another log into the fire, sending a burst of light into the woods. Nothing, just shadows. We laughed it off, though the laughter felt forced this time. An hour later, when we finally decided to call it a night, we realized something strange. Our extra firewood pile was gone. All of it. The neat stack we'd built earlier had vanished, as if someone had carried it away while we sat there. We argued a little. Maybe we'd built it somewhere else. Maybe someone was messing with us, but in the end, we let it go. We were tired. We crawled into our tents, zipped up the doors, and tried to sleep. That's when the whistling started. At first, I thought it was the wind. A thin, high sound, threading through the branches. But it wasn't random. It was a tune. Slow, deliberate, like someone was standing just outside, whistling a lullaby they wanted us to hear. I held my breath, staring at the nylon walls of the tent. The sound circled, moving from one side to the other, as though whoever it was walking around camp. Then it stopped. Silence. I don't know how long I lay awake. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted into uneasy sleep. In the morning, things were worse. Ethan was gone. His tent was there, his bag, his shoes, but no Ethan. The zipper was wide open. And inside, his sleeping bag was perfectly smooth, as if he'd never even touched it. We called his name until our throats burned. We searched the lake shore, the trail, everywhere we could think of. Nothing. No footprints, no signs he'd left. We should have hiked out right then, but fear and stubbornness kept us there. Maybe he wandered off. Maybe he'd come back. That's what we told ourselves. By nightfall, the fire was burning again. We stayed close, barely speaking, staring into the flames like they might protect us. The woods pressed in on all sides, black and endless. That's when we saw him. Ethan. He was standing just beyond the firelight, face pale, eyes wide, clothes still on from the night before. We shouted his name, relief flooding us, but he didn't move. He just stood there, staring. And then, slowly, he turned and walked into the woods. We grabbed flashlights and ran after him, shouting for him to stop. But every time we thought we were close, his figure slipped deeper between the trees, just out of reach. The beams of our lights caught glimpses of him, always facing away, always walking further. Finally, the forest swallowed him. The light couldn't touch him anymore. And then the whistling began again. Not ahead of us, behind us. Back where the campfire still burned. We sprinted back, hearts hammering. The fire was roaring higher than we'd left it, flames stretching unnaturally tall. And around it, 5 logs sat arranged in a circle, like seats waiting for us. 5, not 4. We didn't sleep that night. We didn't dare. By dawn, 2 more of our group were gone, Sarah and Tom. Their tents were empty, belongings untouched, just gone, as if the earth had swallowed them. It was just me and Jenna now. We didn't speak, we didn't plan, we just packed what we could carry and ran. The woods fought us every step, branches clawing, roots tripping, but we didn't stop until we saw the parking lot. Only my car was there. Jenna swore we'd come with 3. I drove us back to town, but the silence in the car was unbearable. When I finally glanced at her, Jenna was staring out the window, lips moving silently, whistling the same tune. I slammed the brakes, heart in my throat. She turned to me slowly, and her face wasn't Jenna's anymore. It was pale, stretched thin, eyes too wide. I don't remember how I got home. Some nights, I wonder if I really did. Because sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear it again, the whistle, weaving through the dark. And when I light a fire in the backyard to chase it away, there are always 5 logs waiting. Always 5. They say lakes remember. I didn't believe that until the summer I camped at Clearwater Lake. It was supposed to be a peaceful solo trip, a reset button after a rough year. I wanted silence, starry skies, and the kind of solitude that makes you feel small in a good way. The first night gave me exactly that. I pitched my tent right by the shoreline, the water lapping gently, the trees whispering in the breeze. I cooked over my little stove, read by flashlight, and fell asleep to the soft rhythm of water against the rocks. It felt safe, comforting. By the second night, the lake started talking back. I was skipping stones just before dusk when I heard laughter. A child's laughter, sharp and bright, carried across the water. My head snapped up, scanning the opposite shore. Nothing but dark trees. No lights, no movement. I told myself sound carries strangely across water. Maybe a family camping somewhere I couldn't see. But the laughter came again. Closer. Right behind me. When I spun around, no one was there. Just my tent, my pack, the faint smoke of my campfire. I didn't sleep much that night. Sometime past midnight, I woke to splashing. At first it sounded like fish breaking the surface, but then it grew heavier, like someone waiting, slow and deliberate. I unzipped the tent just a crack. The moonlight glinted on rippling water. And in the middle of the lake, I saw a figure. It looked like a man, shoulders hunched, head tilted back, as if he were staring at the stars. He stood waist deep in the water, perfectly still, too still. I blinked, and he was gone. No splash, no ripple, just empty water. The next morning, I considered leaving, packing up, calling it quits, but stubbornness won out. I told myself it was exhaustion, nerves, maybe a trick of the moonlight. I stayed. That evening, as the sky turned pink, I built a fire by the shore. The flames danced, and for a while, I felt almost normal again. Then the singing started. It wasn't clear at first, just a low hum, weaving through the crackle of the fire. But soon the words came, muffled but unmistakable. A woman's voice, mournful and slow, singing a lullaby I didn't recognize. I wanted to believe it was someone on a boat, drifting in the dark. But when I shined my flashlight across the lake, the beam caught faces. Dozens of them. Just below the surface, pale and distorted, eyes wide open, staring up, lips moving in silence, echoing the song. I stumbled back, nearly falling into the fire. The beam shook in my hand, and in that flicker, the faces were gone. The lake was smooth as glass. I barely made it through the night. Every splash, every rustle of the trees made my skin crawl. I thought of the man I'd seen, the laughter, the song. If the lake remembered, what exactly did it want me to know? At dawn, I packed my gear and started hiking out. But something made me stop halfway up the trail. A sound soft, rhythmic, like water dripping on stone. I turned back. The lake lay calm and perfect in the early light. And right on the shore, where my tent had been, stood a little girl. She wore a dress that hung heavy and wet, her hair plastered to her face. She didn't move, didn't wave, just stared up the trail at me. And then, in a voice too clear for the distance, she said, "Don't leave the fire. Never leave the fire." The words hit me like a punch. I blinked, and she was gone. I don't know how I made it home. I don't remember the drive, only the sick feeling in my stomach, the sense that something was still following. Weeks later, I looked up the history of Clearwater Lake. I shouldn't have. Back in the 1960 seconds, a church group drowned there. An accident, they said. A boat capsized, trapping kids and their counselor beneath. Locals claimed the lake never gave all the bodies back. Some said if you camped too close, the ones left behind would try to join you. Now, whenever I hear water at night running taps, rain against the window, even just the hum of a pipe, I swear I hear her voice again. Don't leave the fire. Never leave the fire. And I wonder if she was warning me, or if she was asking me to come back. There's a trail up in the Rockies I'll never hike again. People call it Alder's Loop, a 6-mile stretch that winds through pines and past a series of campsites by a narrow river. It looks innocent on the map, but every step I took on that trail felt like walking deeper into a trap I couldn't see. I went with 2 friends, Mark and Lila. We were seasoned campers, the type who brag about hiking in the rain and cooking over fire with nothing but damp twigs. Alder's Loop was supposed to be a fun challenge, one last trip before summer ended. The first day was beautiful. Crisp air, the smell of pine needles, the sound of the river running low from a dry season. We set up camp at Site 3, a small clearing with a stone ring for fire. I remember how relieved we were to find it quiet, tucked away, no one else around. That night, though, something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No crickets, no owls, not even the river. The silence pressed in until every pop of our fire made us flinch. Then, while we were roasting marshmallows, Lila asked, "Hey, where's the trail marker?" We all looked. Usually, each site had a wooden post with the number carved into it. Site 3 should have had a 3, but there was nothing, just the black wall of trees. Mark joked, "Maybe we're the first ones to camp here. Lucky us." But when I looked closer, I realized there had been a post. Just a splintered stump remained, broken clean. That night, I woke to footsteps, not just one pair, several. They circled the tent, crunching leaves, pausing just long enough to let me know I was being listened to. I held my breath, gripping my flashlight, but never dared unzip the flap. Eventually, the steps faded into the woods. By morning, Mark was gone. His sleeping bag lay empty. His boots were still by the fire pit. His pack leaned against a log. It was like he'd gotten up barefoot and walked into the woods. We searched, calling his name until our voices cracked. The trail was supposed to loop, supposed to guide us back. But every direction we took ended the same way. Trees closing in, brush growing thick, no sign of the river anymore. By the second day, Lila and I were hopelessly lost. Hunger gnawed at us, but worse was the feeling of being watched. Every time I turned, I caught glimpses of figures in the trees, too tall, too thin, heads tilted at impossible angles. That night, we didn't light a fire. We sat in the dark, clutching our packs, listening to whispers hiss through the branches. They weren't words, not exactly, but they tugged at my mind, pulling me towards sleep I knew I couldn't survive. Sometime in the dead of night, Lila shook me awake. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Mark's outside," she whispered. I froze. Through the thin nylon wall of the tent, I saw him, his shadow, at least, standing perfectly still, his head cocked, like he was listening for something. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like him, he said, "It's your turn." The next thing I remember is running. Branches tearing at my skin, roots catching my feet, the forest swallowing every direction. I don't know how long I stumbled like that, or when the trees finally opened into the gravel parking lot. My car was the only one there. No Mark, no Lila, just me, standing under the dawn sky, shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. Later, I checked the maps again. Alder's Loop doesn't list a Site 3 anymore. It jumps from 2 to 4. Park rangers say the post must have rotted and fallen. But when I asked about disappearances, their eyes slid away, and they told me not to camp off trail. I didn't tell them the truth that I can still hear Mark's voice some nights, whispering from the dark. "It's your turn.